wow, is it absolutely a privilege and a joy to be a bridge between founders, seeing what I learn and what I can offer and contribute. I don't know what those outcomes are going to be, but I know that they're bigger than me and they're not centered around me, especially coming out of several years of having a company where my journey and my identity was really front and center. Now I get to not be main character syndrome. And I love that. I don't know what those dots are going to look like, but they're going to be on a path of authenticity and ease. Embracing that being uncomfortable is kind of my comfort zone.
Welcome to Finding Your Groove. If you're living and working in a way that's in sync with who you are or you want to be, then you're in the right place. Each episode, we swap stories with guests who have found out that the traditional path isn't set up for people like us. The podcast was created to help listeners like you feel less alone on this journey. Through stories and being in community with each other, we can avoid burnout and inspire each other to keep going. I'm Josh Green.
And I'm Taylor Harrington. Our guest today is Kt McBratney, a total creative powerhouse who's all about disrupting the status bro and shaking things up for the better. As a general partner and head of community at Renew VC, KD is on a mission to change how we invest in and build companies with the goal of putting more good into the world. Curiosity, authenticity, and kindness are non-negotiables for Kt. They're a writer, artist, parent, and borderline book hoarder with a playful side that includes dabbling in Muppet astrology. Yeah, you heard that right. In this episode, Kt talks about why it's so important to make space for creative chaos. They share how little moments of creativity can spark big growth and self-expression. We also get into a metaphor that really stuck with me. I'll tease it and just say that it involves water and finding your flow. One of my favorite parts of the conversation was when we dove into the difference between wounds and scars and how experiences can leave a mark on us and how we transform them as we move forward. Kt shares a thoughtful take on how to respond when life throws new challenges our way. Throughout the episode, Kt reminds us to make space for pauses, embrace the mess, and find meaning in both the chaos and the calm. It's all about honoring every part of the journey, and I cannot wait for you to hear it. So with that, let's go ahead and dig into it. Hey, Kt.
Hello, hello.
I am so excited to go ahead and get started. I would love to know, what did you bring for show and tell today?
Thank you for asking. I brought my favorite pair of scissors.
I love this already.
Great scissors.
They are phenomenal. They're like the best $5 I've ever spent, I think. Highly recommend this pair of scissors.
For people that can't see and are just listening, describe these scissors.
They are about 5 inches in total length. They are Fisker's brand. They're metal. They're nothing fancy. They are just truly a perfect scissor. Little orange handles. Again, it's a pair of scissors. It's nothing revolutionary, but it's a good thing done exceptionally well. But that's not why I brought it.
Tell us why you brought it.
I brought it because in thinking about what to bring for show and tell across my journey, which as you two know, and the audience will likely soon find out, has been interesting, twisty-turvy, lots of loop-de-loops. Something that has always anchored me is the act of creating. And so I am a visual artist as well, and it's something that I don't monetize, I don't promote necessarily. I talk about it, but like it is for me, and it's for the art of creating. And I primarily right now work in collage and mixed media. So like the scissors are a reminder that like anywhere I go, I can create, whether it be art, but also that like idea that like no matter where life takes me or where I am at the moment, I have all the tools to like make something at my disposal, whether or not it's a new friend, a new idea, a new collaboration, or literally a physical piece of art. I don't need it all to make a lot.
I love that. I think it's been a real theme of these different like grounding practices that we have, and has come up in these shows of just like, what do we need in our life to stay connected to ourselves? And what are the rhythms and where does that come in? I love it. It's like the simplicity of a good pair of scissors can open up the possibility of me being creative wherever I am.
Exactly. And like, it's not fancy materials. It's old magazines. Like I think I have a paper magazine from like 2018 with Kim Kardashian on it that I still have, that I pull things from. And it's like, you don't have to you are the ultimate tool. Like, and I love that you brought up grounding practices, because it's very much a thing that I get in flow, and I don't need to show my work. I can just do it for the sake of doing. And I feel like that's such a, at times in this world, a rare opportunity. So I try to take it when I can. Otherwise, I couldn't cope.
Are there any like fixed rituals or times that you have creativity in your week?
Great question. The answer is yes and no. I mean, I have a kindergartner, so it's more of a practical answer than it used to be when I had more freedom over my schedule. So usually it's after she's in bed and the dishes are done and nobody is blowing up my phone, and I can just like turn on a documentary, turn on some music, and get into the groove.
No pun intended.
No pun intended.
Jinx. And we're also twinning today for those of you on audio.
Which is an honor, because I've now been on a few podcast episodes where Josh has been twinning in his white t-shirt. He doesn't really change too much with other guests in white t-shirts, and I was the odd person out. So to be in a bright pink sweater feels right, and be twinning with someone.
Definitely feels appropriate contrast to the weather outside as well.
Yeah, it's very, very gray.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to make your own sunshine.
Yeah. What I love about these show and tells is it's like also bringing up memories for me. I remember being when I was really young, so my mom was really into scrapbooking. Still loves, like, still a creative woman, but doesn't necessarily exercise her scrapbooking activities as much. But she was really, really into it. And so at a young age, I also got really into it, and literally had a scrapbooking party as a like 10-year-old. Which, like, makes sense. I feel like on this podcast, when I talk about these, like, random little things from growing up, Josh he keeps being like, this makes sense. And I'm like, yeah, it does.
It does.
But anyways, my mom knew this woman. You know how they had, like, Pampered Chef and, like, all those different, like, so she was, like, a creative memories ambassador.
That is a blast from the past, and I love it.
Right? So my mom knew this woman who was this ambassador, talking about community and stuff too. I mean, wild. These gatherers so this woman brought people into her basement, and it was like a decked out basement with these beautiful shelves and all of these different tables, and the scissor collection she had. Oh, unbelievable. So that's what this is bringing me into, is like all of the zigzag scissors and the like little fun ones that had like dots somehow in them, and you would like punch holes through the scissors. It was unbelievable. So yeah, I'm suddenly back in that basement with my mom making our little scrapbooks. I had like a mini little pink book that I was obsessed with.
I love it. And like there's something so like, and I'm curious, Josh, for you, like this idea of like grounding, creative, but also like tangible memory or mementos. Like I feel like there's a theme there too of it's like it's not just making something that lives on the internet. It's like the act of physically making something that somehow connects you to somebody else, even if you make it alone. I don't know, Josh, do you have something
so
like that? So
interesting. It's funny because firstly, I have this weird connection to magazines also separately, which is not my grounding practice. I love magazines. So
they're delightful.
Yeah, I have maybe 10 subscriptions to different magazines of all sorts. I love them because I love curated snapshots in time of worlds.
Yeah.
And you know, you get, whether it's National Geographic or Fast Company or The Economist or The Week, you get like a world that an editorial team decided, like, we're going to show you a world through this lens. Or New Scientist. And in my house, there are stacks of magazines everywhere. Like and my wife wants to throw them out always. She's like, you've read it now, so we don't need to keep it. I'm like, no, I love Monocle. Don't throw Monocle out. That makes me happy. It just brings me such joy. So that's what I was thinking about when you guys were talking about scissors and creative mementos.
Yeah, and there's like, I definitely have stacks of magazines that I do not cut, because I also have a lot of reverence as somebody. I went to school for journalism, and so I know how much effort and how much human resources and not just capital goes into making those. And also it's a hard business model. And so like I have magazines, like I love the magazine Juxtaposition, which is an art magazine. It's beautiful. Highly recommend getting that as your 11th subscription. But like I don't cut those up. Those are just purely to like look back through. But then, I think I have Popular Mechanics. Don't know how I got those, but
I feel like next time I come down to Atlanta, I'm just going to load up magazines into my car and then just arrive at your house and be like, here are 100 magazines for your collaging practice.
I would be infinitely, I might squeal with delight. I might not be able to like hold it in.
So I was just meandering on that as you were sharing about collaging. But back to grounding practice, I wish I had creativity more as grounding practices in my life. It's really not my expression of my expression of grounding. And maybe this is, I spend a lot of time helping my wife in the vegetable gardens outside and being in the earth and being in nature. And those are the way my nervous system really resets, is through quietness and things where my mind can't wander. And normally in the garden, you're just like in the dirt, and that really brings me into it. But I do miss it. So I think hearing Taylor's story of childhood creativity, I spent my teenage years building things. Like I built my first car. That was me covered in like grease and oil, rebuilding it, like the head gasket on the engine of my car or whatever it might be. Those places I miss, and I sort of wish I had them back in my life a lot more.
It's so much more satisfying for me personally, that like the satisfaction of building something or restoring something or making something physical. Inbox zero could never compare to that feeling of satisfaction, which, let the record show, I am not an inbox zero person. I unsubscribed from that lifestyle like years ago. It doesn't work for me, but there's just a different feeling of, I'm sure when you built that car and you took it for its, like when it was in its full glory and you took it on that first drive, it was an incredible feeling.
It's a wonderful feeling until it breaks down on the following corner. No, it's a beautiful, I really miss having that. But I also am really grateful to be in nature and have the quietness, and however our nervous systems need to be nourished or reset. As a gift. I think it's just like is a life gift to learn along the way. Like, what is as Taylor and me have been talking about recently, these different menus that are accessible in our lives. Like, do we take a step back to write a list of things that we can access?
Well, I think there's something about this, like just talking about it now. When do we make space to be messy in our lives? Like, that's the thing that I think is really interesting about this, because Josh, for you, it sounds like that shows up, like you said, like getting in the dirt out in the back. And Katie, like that's like maybe in that collaging of like, oh, it doesn't need to be perfect. There's no one right way to collage. And I've just been thinking about this a lot. There's a woman in New York. Her name's Megan McBratney, I think is her last name. And she runs a company called Art Girl. And she's picked up like a really big following in the last several months. But she just launched this thing. It's like her whole philosophy is like, how do we make art and be messy with it and be okay with it being messy? So she just launched this program where she basically teaches people how to let go of it needing to be beautiful and it needing to turn out in a certain way. And like, what are some of those different practices for how you can take a paintbrush or crayon or whatever and just like go to town in the morning and like let it all out on the paper. And I guess in the last like week or so, I've been reflecting on how I don't really allow myself to be messy very much. And one way that I think I have been exercising it is through taking care of my plants outside on my new little terrace I have in my apartment, because I had dirt up all in my fingers, and I was like, when was the last time that like I had so much dirt in my fingers? And I love art as a way to do that, and yet I have a really hard time being messy with art because I want it to be beautiful.
I think that, when did we but then if you think back to like 10-year-old you doing your creative memories.
Oh, 100%.
I think as children, we didn't give ourselves this pressure of art being quote unquote right? right? And this idea of messy being synonymous with not right or not beautiful.
Right. Yeah.
I think a lot about when we lose that, and it's different for each person, and it's dynamic, and that relationship to messiness and to perfection changes and ebbs and flows over time. But I think it's ultimately tied to, I don't know, I have a hypothesis brewing, but it's around authenticity. It's around acceptance and grace. And also it's rooted in play and imagination and possibility. Like, who decides what the right way to draw a house is? Like, photorealistic, like, is not the only way to go. Like, look at abstract expressionism. Look at Picasso. Like, look at all of this. These revered people that did it messy. And like, I think that's part of the reason that I'm like drawn to community, and I'm drawn to conversations and people like you too, is this idea of like holding space for the beautiful parts of being human, which also include the messy and like the unfinished and the I'm figuring it out phase. And we brush past so much of that in the business world, when really, I believe that's like the bulk of our human existence. Our experience as humans is being wrong and figuring it out.
Yeah, it's firstly 100%. And I think one of the things is media doesn't support emergence, right? It supports perfection. And what I loved about where we started this whole journey is you were like, I don't collage for anyone else. It's not that anyone has to see my work. It's just part of process. And some people might see your work. I think my own journey has been allowing people to see more of my mess over the past 5 or 10 years. Because definitely, I don't know what point it came into my life, but it definitely came into my life that I was just like really bad at looking stupid or not doing things well or things not being beautiful. And know that drove a lot of my 20s in super unhealthy ways of trying to fit into societal norms about what it means to be a human. And it actually brought up one of the things that I was thinking about is my wife got me into ecstatic dance. And ecstatic dance is so wonderful in that respect, because it allows you to build that muscle of just let your body move. Like, it doesn't matter how it's going to move. It doesn't have to look good or look pretty. You also don't have to dance with anyone else. Like, you can just find your flow. And I think the thing for me that was so beautiful about that I resonated in your collaging is it's not for anyone else. It doesn't last. You walk into the room and 2 hours later you leave. There was a journey. You got to express your messiness. And I think a lot about how do we create containers that can support building those muscles in our lives, especially as you're sort of stepping out and crafting journeys on your own, or where the system isn't going to give you the next step.
Or doesn't want to give you the next step, right? I think in thinking about like fitting into boxes and those pressures, a lot of times like the systems don't want us to push against those artificial limits, to press against those walls and find the weak points for ourselves. And, as you're talking about that, I wonder for both of you, like, how have you embraced, or what is your relationship to bringing parts of that just messiness of being a human into work, into community? Like, you have practices for yourself, and those sound sacred, and I love that. And are you observing any bleed over since you've done more of that and in bringing the mess into the day-to-day?
Taylor, I'm curious what comes up for you.
Well, the first thing that comes up for me is it's a tough one, because it's like I can think of a very specific situation where I have let go of needing for things to be like perfect or well done or whatever, where I just did the exact opposite and shouted out so transparently, like, I effed up. And the example of it is I had like crafted this email a couple of years ago now to the Groove community, and we had, thousands of people on this email list, and I like crafted this email and I worked really hard on it, and it was announcing something. I don't even remember what it was, but I knew that there was a Zoom link, and I messed up the Zoom link in the email, And right after it was sent out, I got the email from someone that was like, hey, this link doesn't work. I was like, oh my God, I spent so much time on this thing. And then I hit send and like, I tested the email. Like, I don't know what happened. And I was so upset. And so I literally went to Google and I Googled like fun links to put in an email, because I was like, well, if I'm going to send out a second email, it needs to be fun. And I found this thing that was called screamintothevoid.com, where you could literally like write something and then press send, and there would be a scream that would go out into the void. You could hear it. And so I found this website and I put it into the email and was like, hey, I just messed up. I'm busy screaming into the void about how I screwed up. And if you're having a rough day and like something goes wrong and you need to scream into the void here, here's the link to go ahead and do that. And here's the new Zoom link. It's one of the first examples where I can remember being so transparent about like, I'm so mad right now that I just did this thing in a community-wide email or a community-wide communication, and then tried to figure out how do I twist it into a fun way. So yeah, that's what came up, which is not really answering your question exactly, but I think it's really hard to admit when we screw something up, especially when there are a lot of eyes on us in that communication, and recognizing that we also might make the wrong decisions sometimes. I can think of another example where like someone called me out on something that I said, and I was like, you know what? I actually agree with you. I wish I didn't say that. And so being able to be transparent in those moments and to welcome that learning and welcome like, hey, yeah, I might be the one that had my name on this thing and I may have said that. And also, I just learned a lot from you and this is what I think now. And I think that flexibility is like so key.
So true. Wow. I want to come back a little bit to this feeling of like the system doesn't really want you to be messy or emergent. I wonder, Katie, if there's like a moment in your journey that we could all land in with you that you felt that.
Yeah, I mean, the hardest part of that question, it's a question I love and I'm grateful that you asked, is that it's a feeling, and there have been so many moments my entire life. You know, I saw like scenes from my childhood even, right? Of fitting in and being quote unquote like the right kind of athlete, the right kind of girl, the right kind of all of these things, and never feeling like any of those boxes that I could sit in fit. And not necessarily all tied to identity, right? But this idea of like, this is how it's supposed to be done, so do it this way, always felt uncomfortable to me. Like we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I don't need to like write with paint instead of ink. But like there are certain things in life that I'm like, yeah, but why? Why do we need to do it that way?
Was there a moment at school that you really asked that question that you remember and you did it differently?
You know, I remember, okay, this is not about writing, but it is a middle school memory. So I'll just place you back into the mid-90s for a moment. We'll go on a journey back to there. And that's such a hard time, regardless of like what era, what year you're in middle school. Like that's a hard time. And everybody wants to be cool, wants to be accepted, all of those. But I also wanted to be me. And that's just been something really strong in me that like it's harder for me to try to fit in the box than it is for me to stop fighting it and just be me. But I remember like all of my friends were doing.
Can I just like be with that statement? Because that's like I think that's such a resonant feeling in me. And I think for so many listeners that like I'm weighing up the hardness and everything's hard, right? We spoke about it when we chatted yesterday, but it's like picking that hardness. I just want to let that land because I think that's like a deep feeling that a lot of listeners and I definitely resonate with.
Yeah, thank you. It took me a long time to be able to name that too. And my friend Mags helped me in that by sharing a story of her own life. So to kind of this idea of sharing stories. And I promise we might get back to middle school me. I don't know. But she had this beautiful analogy about that. She was like, I'm spending all of my time, because she's an activist bent and all that. She's like, I've been spending so much of my professional and personal life swimming against a current swimming upstream to try to make things work within the systems that don't want me to succeed. But what if I, instead of fighting against it, what if I embrace my current and I float down it like a lazy river? Like, why can't doing the work I want in the world feel like ease and not a fight? And that broke my brain for a while and has sat with me for years still. Like, maybe it's how we're working with the currents. It's not that it has to be hard. We have choices.
Let's hit pause there and take a quick break to hear from a member of our community, Groove. Because let's be honest, living life this way isn't always easy, and a little bit of advice can go a long way. So let's phone a friend and hear from Stephanie Michelson. Stephanie is a freelance writer, newsletter writer, owner of The Practical Pen, and a mama. She writes for Forbes Home, USA Today, Homefront, Apartment Therapy, and more, with a focus on commerce, home improvement, and reviews. Stephanie, I would love to hear, what is one thing that has made a real difference for you in how you work from home as a creative?
The thing that transformed how I work from home is realizing that the way that I was working is actually the best way for me to continue to work. So since I started working from home, I was primarily a stay-at-home mom, and I would get up around like 4 or 4:30 to get my work done before the kids got home. I would maybe work after they went to bed, depending on how much work there was. This year, they are all in school. So I was so excited. I'm like, this is going to be great. I'm going to be able to work during the day like a normal person. And then I quickly realized that I was not at my most productive, and somehow I wasn't getting done what I needed to get done despite the 9 hours of being home. So I started waking up early again. And I find that things flow a lot better for me before the sun comes up. And I know that that is not how everybody works, but that it's when I'm most productive. And so that's allowed me to get a lot of my like regular work done before the kids get up, just like I was doing. And then when they're gone for the day, I'm able to kind of move on to more like fun projects or keep up. So yeah, it's been great because I also got to realize that something that I thought that like I had to do, like I had to get up early and work, actually turns out to be the thing that I actually really love doing. So if this sounds like you and you're kind of struggling to feel like you're at your most productive, I would encourage to maybe look back at things that have worked in the past and then maybe try and re-implement them and tweak them as necessary and just kind of lean into it and go with it and see what works.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. To learn more about Stephanie and her work, and also our community where you could co-work with Stephanie and people like her, other freelancers, creatives, and business owners, go ahead into the show notes and check it out. Now, back to the conversation.
There's so much for us to explore here. I want to hear the end of the middle school story.
Okay, I'll close the loop on the middle school story.
Or start it, really, because we're just landing.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm in private Catholic middle school in Omaha, Nebraska. We're going to set our story there. It is 1996, maybe 95. Butterfly clips. Like this idea of like having the right like hair. It was the baby doll. Grunge was a whole thing. So like the baby doll dresses with the little barrettes. And I liked those, but I saw a colorful paper clip. You know the paper clips that are like coated in like colorful plastic and things so that they can retain. And I was like, what if I use that as a clip instead of a butterfly clip? Because my hair just would always come out of the butterfly clips and they were annoying and I would have weird flyaways and they just didn't work with literally how my hair grows. And I was like, I'm going to put my hair in a little twist and anchor it with this colorful paper clip. And so I did that. And it was the first time really just being like, yeah, I see what you're doing and I like it, but it's not for me. And I'm going to visibly show you just my own idea and expression of holding my hair back. And there were some people that were just like, that's weird. Why would you do that? Like, and I was like, because I want to and I like it. Full sentence. So like there's that piece of it. And so many moments like that where I'm just like, I just don't want to do it that way. Why do you even care if I have a paper clip in my hair? Don't put it in yours.
I think it's really it's really resonant about the visible piece, because I think that, you know, that's also a theme that me and Taylor have spoken about before around like how we're seen, because then it's like how we're seen. Like I'm intentionally making a difference how I'm being seen right now.
Or allowing yourself to be seen, right? Like
allowing yourself to be seen like that.
I think clothing is a really interesting example, and accessories and like how we style ourselves, because it's a really early freedom that we typically get the chance to express. I mean, even friends of mine that, uniforms throughout college, or not college, uniforms throughout like elementary school, middle school, high school, how they did their hair might have been the freedom that they had to express themselves visually. And so it's really interesting, to think about like at a young age, how that's one of the easiest ways for us to step out of how others are doing things and show our, self-express. Very interesting. Wow, I'm loving this paperclip in your hair image. Like, can we bring that back?
It worked too because it was coated in like the plastic, so it didn't pull the hair. It was just like a little accent. It worked. So hey, fair game. We'll start a movement. It's way more comfortable than a butterfly clip too. Those things get pokey and just not for me.
I hope that listeners email us with like all of their paperclip hair dues after this. Like, hey, join the club.
There's a paper theme to this episode, sponsored by Big Paper.
Yeah. If I could get a stationery sponsor for like anything I do in life, that would just be like chef's kiss. Like, I would love to be sponsored by like some cool random, I would say like Paper Source, but think like indie vibes, like a small town stationery store.
Like that one that we were in Atlanta recently.
Yes. Yeah. Oh gosh, I wish I knew the name of it to tell Katie right now, but it was lovely.
If you think of it, please let me know.
Will do.
Stationery recommendations coming soon.
I really was just thinking about your friend Maggie and what she shared with you. And
I think it was just Mags. Was it Maggie?
Yeah, she used to go by Maggie, but now it's Mags. Both are true.
Oh, great. Mags is great. And that image of what if I just allow myself to free flow, go down the river, and it's interesting because as I thought about that and checked in with myself of like, well, that doesn't just feel easy. Like I hear it and it doesn't feel easy. And I'm curious, in my own life, I was only recently diagnosed with ADHD and had been on my own like neurodiverse journey. And it's been so, you put so much effort and energy into fitting in until you decide that you're not going to do it anymore. But it builds up so much weight and so much baggage because that's like, it's really draining to push against the system. And then, so you're pushing against the system and then you're, okay, cool. I'm gonna, there's like some moment where there's more going against the system than going with the system. Right. Yeah. And you start to, at least in my own journey, like pull back those layers of Josh that maybe aren't the layers that I want to move through the world in. But that weight and the baggage, and often like in my own life, maybe it's like comes up in shame because whatever it is for not playing by the rules that I grew up within or whatever it is. There's this release before you really can allow your way to just take you. Because you're right, like when you find that flow that's really you, it's easy. Like it's truly easy. And I've seen that in my own life in the last few years, in those moments where I really just allow myself to move like Josh. There's ease. And I'm curious, like middle school, being visible, like where does the journey go from there in terms of when do you start to see that there's more living from Katie than allowing the system to define that? And like, does it feel, or is it like, is there this emergent feeling that I can just be in my flow and like go down river and catch those currents?
Yeah, it's definitely a journey, and I'm absolutely still on it. I think I will be on it for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned for the rest of my life, right? Because I've created my own baggage, right? I've had my own kind of emotional and physical like ties to things, and also, thanks therapy, but also like noting that sometimes we're carrying baggage and bags that aren't from our own journey, that we either inherited or picked up from someone else. So it's definitely an unlayering process. I really love that framing of it. And for me, it's come in cycles and seasons, and it is rooted in being authentic for that moment and learning how to have boundaries in different ways. I think boundaries and learning those has been a huge like personal like growth hack, to use that kind of icky word. But on my emergence journey has been like, what do boundaries really mean? And it used to be I interpreted it as boundaries meant like, you can't do that to me. So like, for example, one specific moment comes to mind of that kind of clicked something in my brain in this journey was years ago, I was in a long-term relationship with someone, and his mother was very traditional, conventional, very much gender roles, all of that, which I don't subscribe to. I'm out as a proud non-binary person, but was not at the time. And he had like a flat tire. And I was like, oh, I fixed cars. I've done this. It's a flat tire. Like, I drive. Everybody should be able to do this. And so I was going to help change it. And she was like, no. What are you doing? And I was like, I'm right here. He's busy like doing a work call or something. I can start jacking up the car and doing this. She was like, no. You need to go inside or stand here and I'll bring you something to drink and you'll look cute and he'll come out and do it. And I was like, no. And so at the time I thought of boundaries being letting her tell me what my role was a boundary I would set. She's not allowed to talk to me that way. But the real lesson was, or the real like moment that was aha through my anger and shame and frustration in not fitting her role of what I was supposed to be as the girlfriend. It was like, oh no, I choose what she has access to of those parts of myself. And taking it from more of a place of control versus a place of like, I won't let you do that to me. It was more saying, I won't let you access my energy in that way. I won't let you I won't let you hijack my day. I won't let you dictate my role. And so like that was very clear moment. Like I can still see the driveway. I can still see this black Nissan in the driveway of this suburban Midwestern home. And just, it was like at the optometrist when they ask like, which lens is better? Is it better now? Is it better now? And a clear lens had dropped in front of my eyes. And I carried that story with me for a long time before I think I really recognized that it was a quiet, pivotal moment. She probably doesn't even remember it either. Like I bet if one, she's never going to listen to this because I don't know. It's not her.
Wait, you don't think our podcast is going to blow up and reach her? What?
I mean, I kind of want to send it to them now, to be honest, and be like, hey, did you guess which story is about you? I don't think she's very interested in personal growth.
Understood.
I think she could learn a lot.
I think that's true about so many of our learning moments, though, right? That normally we're impacted in ways that there's like a meeting of a context and a reality and our own internal reality that just means like, oh, like I like to think that when a thing's ripe for healing or integration or learning is really, there's like an attunement there of like, that was ripe for you in that moment. Like 3 years before, maybe it wouldn't have been ripe. You know, it's nice when it's not overripe because then you've probably like had to live with a truth or something new for too long that maybe hasn't been integrated. Yeah. Taylor, you were about to say something.
Well, I don't even know what I was about to say, but I'll say now that I think it's really interesting the little moments and nuggets that we take from other people, like, and how that influences our actions along the way. And as you mentioned, like those moments that kind of happen as little whispers that might then lead to us taking bigger action later. But in the moment, they might not seem as significant. This one seems like it was a significant moment. But, you know, I think about like how just watching someone else do something small can sometimes be like then put in a little file in the back of my brain. So when I'm in a situation, I bring that file up and I'm like, oh, I watched Katie do this thing months ago or years ago, and it's now inspiring me to now do X, Y, and Z. And I think that's what's so cool of the collection of experiences that lives in our brain without us even really intentionally thinking about it or like crafting that filing cabinet. And so, you know, when you mentioned the like going up the river and that image, there's something so interesting about that visual for me because I'm really grateful to say I don't feel like I'm doing that alone. I'm not going up the river alone. And so whether it's, you know, like I don't know if it's having a kayak and having the oar be something that has been passed down through all of these friends that have inspired me along the way, that makes it more possible for me to go up the river, or if it's, you know, swimming through the river and realizing like, holy shit, there's like all these people behind me that are cheering me on that are a part of this too. And there's people ahead of me that I get to go and reach and, you know, high five once I get there. And I think, yeah, I'm just loving this, like this image of a river, because I think it's so powerful to think about all of the people who have been on the river before us and are currently on the river with us, just in some sort of a different way, and how that affects us being able to do this sustainably for the long run. So I'm really loving this river analogy. Thank you.
Thank you. Because it's interesting, as you said that, I realized that when I picture it in my mind, and when I have before today pictured that in my mind, oftentimes in the river, I feel like I almost visualize myself more alone, right? Like uphill battle, Sisyphus pushing up the boulder, all of that. Yet when I think about floating down, like following my current, like it's like your true fun summer tubing, like down the river. Like there are friends. I have a colorful inner tube that I'm on. I have some great sunglasses and like some drink in a colorful, like it is much more vibrant and it is community focused. And I think, I don't know, I somehow culturally, this idea of ease has become like aligned with coasting or not trying or not caring. And to me, it was freeing to think of ease as being a communal experience, as being collective power. And what you were saying earlier, Josh, like it's using less energy to do the same thing. It's efficient, but it's also because it's collective. So now I'm going to take that, Taylor, that idea of like the river and what oar I'm using and whose wake am I in and who put the mile markers or the stones. Like even when it feels like you're swimming upstream against the current on your own, you are not the first person to go in that water or the last.
Hell no. I would love to take us in more of like a professional direction with this. I'm curious, what has been one of those moments for you where either you've felt like you were going up the stream and you were like, hell no, I need to make a change here, or when you, in that moment, maybe like later after that, where you were like, nope, I'm floating down. This is a moment where I'm going to float down. So either direction, choose your own adventure, but would love to hear about like either of those moments.
I think this one's going to be more of the former. I don't know. You two tell me.
Let's hear it.
One is like so visceral still to me. Like so many people, I had been laid off. I was at an early stage startup. It was a post-Series 8 company. All of that. Things were going well. I had just gotten a raise. We had just had a team building exercise. And the way that I understand, and I've had to do layoffs before on the other side, like it sucks. Nobody wins. It can be an awful experience for everyone. And also I believe in being human and how you work with your teammates in hiring, exiting, all of that. And I'll just say that like some of the folks involved in this did absolutely everything right. They were very, very empathetic and kind. And the CEO was not. The CEO, it was an open floor plan office, a very tall person. They pretended to hide under their desk as the people who were, the reduction in force as those people left because they felt uncomfortable, right? And it was thinly veiled. We all knew. And then, the fact that it was clear that this had been a plan in the works, but the team outings and the raises and all of that was really just kind of like, oh, what can we throw at them before we have to pull the rug out? And I remember standing in the parking lot. It was an hour after I'd come into work. So it happened early in the day. And I was like, what am I going to do with the rest of my day? What am I going to do with the rest of my life? Like, holy shit, I don't have a job. Was not expecting to have to brush up my resume. And not feeling any guilt or shame because it wasn't performance-based. I knew my numbers. The company was changing directions, fine. The logic of it was fine. How it was handled did not sit well with me and with other people involved. And I remember standing on the asphalt in LA that day. It was hot. I was sweating. I had cried. And I'm not an easy crier, but I had cried. So I was like, well, this is weird. And I had this like moment where I was like, I am never going to work that hard. Blood, sweat, and tears, right? Like pouring so much of myself into a job that doesn't align with my values again. I just had this realization. I had no idea what that would mean or what the next steps would be or what that would look like. No clue how to go about doing it. But I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't be collateral damage for someone else's goals that don't necessarily align with mine. Like, I'm very much on the team profit and purpose, not one at the expense of another. I feel very strongly about extractive business models and things like that. And I was like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore, and I'm not going to, and I'm going to succeed. I had no idea what it was going to be like, but that was well more than a decade ago. And I think I'm doing it.
What was the first step? I think that clarity is really powerful. And I think sometimes we need those. I know some of my biggest learnings have also just come from really tough moments.
Yeah.
We're just like,
one of our previous guests, Carlos, called them life quakes. And I just loved that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And I think, so much of why we started this podcast and the people that we hope get value from listening are to know that we are in it together, and this theme is coming through so strongly already with our river metaphor and these moments that are just so relatable. And it's cool to hear like that turning point moment. I'm like, and now for the last decade or so, I'm profit, purpose, authentic to me, value aligned. And that has its own ups and downs, I'm sure. Like, where does the journey go from there? Like, after you're sat outside, what am I going to do with the rest of the day? Like, what was that first step?
Typically I would be like, oh, here's practically what I did. But the honest answer to that first step was I felt my feelings. And I didn't rush into being, quote unquote, productive or the resume or exploring roles or talking. Yes, I talked to people, but it was more about feeling my feelings. I had to go through them to get to the other side of what that meant and what the right practical steps for me meant. And that's hard for me. Like, I'm a very emotional, empathetic person. And I'm also very, I have a bias towards action. I like to do. And so sometimes sitting with my feelings instead of solving for them can be really challenging. But honestly, I think that was my first true step to making that a reality. Was I had to feel the feelings. I had to feel angry. I had to feel disappointment. I had to feel scared. Like, I had student loans. I had bills. Like, it was not a good time to not have a job. But I had to feel those realities instead of just rushing past them.
It's such a gift that you were able to have that space. And I think you touch on something that's just so important, because I often think about that. And when I spend time with groovers, and there were realities of life that mean the flow of life happens. Student loans, rent to be paid. There's this stuff that sits on us, and hearing you share that you gave yourself the space for feelings, it's possible for people,
I mean, and it took me a long time. I was well into my 30s, but I did it. I'm still trying to do it.
I think that's what's so powerful about healing is it does take time. Like, literally, if you bang up your arm, it's going to take a while. And I love that concept. Have you guys ever heard of this concept of talking about a scar versus a wound? So the idea is basically that if something is still in the process of healing. So for example, if you're I was laid off, whether it was 10 years ago or 2 months ago, it still might be a wound. A wound might take extra time for some reason. Maybe there's still something being splashed in there once in a while that's opening it back up, whatever it is. Something is a wound, and it's really, really hard to talk about still. There's so much emotion with that. Versus a scar being something that is healed over. It's still there. There's still pain when you look down at your arm and you see that scar and you think of oh my gosh, it took so long for that thing to heal. But it's sort of these it's a moment when that thing moves from being a wound to being a scar, and the ability for us to talk about something that's gone through that transition is very, very different than us talking about it when it's still that open wound. And I think that in moments like this, whether it's a life quake, as Carlos called it, or whether it's, a layoff, having gone through one myself as well, I just wasn't ready to talk about it at first in a public way. And so to be able to transition into a place of peace with that information and with like what happened associated with that, it moved into a scar that I'm able to now have a proper conversation about. But it's really interesting when things are in that in between.
I'm curious, and Josh, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is like, what is the relationship, or what is your relationship with growth as growth and healing? Like, are those on parallel paths? Are they part of the same? Like, how do you think about those two concepts?
I think a lot of life is becoming aware of our thresholds, is becoming aware of both boundaries, right? Of the upper boundaries and lower boundaries of whatever dimension we're exploring, whether it's emotional, whether it's our values, whether it's pace of life, whether it's relationships. Because there are these like windows that allow us to thrive within, and certain areas of life that window is really small, and certain areas of life that window is really big. I hold some really deep beliefs around just the joy that comes from living integrated, authentic versions of ourselves. Like that's what it really means to be alive. So growth and healing are inextricably linked, right? That the possibility of me being able to reintegrate a part of myself that maybe has been exiled or left out, or I have shame or I repress, whatever that might be, is such an inhibitor to really being me. And so much possibility comes when I can bring that version back into myself. But the threshold is really the thing that allows us to do it in a healthy way. Because I see so many people around me, I think it's such an unhelpful, it might be true, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but it's just such it's just not useful. It doesn't help me think, okay, and you look at people that go through really hard things and their superpowers come from really hard things. But life isn't about choosing those challenges. Because actually what you want to be able to do is bring all of you through it. And if you're in a state of dissociation because the weight of it is just too much to bear, that even though you might build something from it, you've got to go back and do a bunch of healing anyway. Right? The possibility of growth and healing being interwoven is the self-understanding of how quickly can I move? What is this horizon that is possible for me to be on? And to not allow myself to just like go back and be content of like, that's the lower bound of where like it's not serving me, just being comfortable. And by the way, we get kicked when we're in that for too long anyway by something, So I really, this idea of, am I playing within my window of tolerance, within my thresholds that allows me to grow and allows me to become more me and to heal the parts of me that like just everyday life is activating, has been really central to me finding my own pace. Yeah. I don't know how that resonates with both of you, but that's definitely been my exploration in my own journey.
Yeah, and I think, with these journeys, it's hard to predict the future and to know like where are we going next. And it's funny, Katie, when I was like, I'm trying to remember how we originally got connected, because I know I've known you for years now and just have been like LinkedIn buddies and also like been on Zoom calls and whatnot. And I went back to our original LinkedIn messages and I figured out that I had heard about your company Own Trail in a Slack group and had reached out and been like, this idea is amazing. I'm so excited to check it out. And so for anyone that's listening, Own Trail still lives on today, correct? But you're not as involved. Yes.
Yep.
And so what I love about Own Trail is it was this visual of a trail where you've had these little dots along the way that help you connect to the next piece. And it's sort of like seeing your journey in a zoomed out way with these personal and professional moments all intertwined on one map. And I'm curious, as we wrap up this episode and you think about like your dots and where you've been, is there something that you're looking forward to next as like a future dot that could be on your map? Like, is there one that you would be so excited to mark on there, whether it's a year from now, several years from now, or are you just trusting in the trail and what does that mean to you? Would love to hear.
Ooh, great question. And thank you. I love that it resonated with you. And honestly, like that experience of building Own Trail was was deeply connected also to my own personal journey, right? In community and doing it in public, like literally as part of my job was modeling vulnerability and all of that. Right now, I feel like the next kind of chapter of my journey is about finding that is about following the path. So almost like the line of the trail, following that line of authenticity and ease. And I love that framework of the thresholds, right? And having these upper and lower bounds, because to me, it is that. It's like, how can I do that within the realities, within the existing conditions of needing to make money, needing to work with people who are values aligned, all of that. But also like, so letting that be like my internal compass and playing within those thresholds towards, honestly, like the next milestone always seems to be community and playing with what that looks like. Currently I'm on the other side as an investor, and like, wow, is it absolutely a privilege and a joy to get to be a bridge between founders who we're each carrying our own trauma and our own experiences, and just holding space for that in this journey that can feel really transactional. So like the next blip, the next dot on that is seeing what this side, what I learn and what I can offer and contribute on this side of the equation. And I don't know what that looks like yet. I don't know what those outcomes are going to be, but I know that they're bigger than me and they're not centered around me. And that feels really, really good, especially coming out of several years of having a company where my journey and my identity was really front and center. Now I get to actively every single day not be main character syndrome. And I love that. So I don't know what those dots are going to look like, but they're going to be on a path of authenticity and ease for sure, with amazing people, some of whom I'm in present company with, some of whom I've known for years, and some of people we haven't met yet. And I'm excited for that chapter. And I'm getting more and more comfortable the older I get and the longer in my career. Embracing that being uncomfortable is kind of my comfort zone.
I'm really excited to hear how this season goes. Like, I just love thinking about our lives in seasons, and it feels like you've really entered a new season in the last little bit, and that this is part of that journey of like, what is this going to look like? And seeing that with possibility, and maybe a little fear, maybe some other negative emotions that come with that, but also that, that optimism and possibility that, hey, I'm on something that is going to bring me that ease and that excitement.
Exactly. Like taking on the venture capital system is not a feat I could do single-handedly, even if I gave my entire life and profession to it. And I shouldn't be the only one doing it. But like, even if I can dent some of those flawed, inefficient, ineffective, exclusionary systems, hell yes. Like, let's chip at all these things from all sides. And it's hard and it's scary and it's frustrating. And it's amazing. And it brings me in circle with people like you all, which I love.
Well, this conversation has been so rich with stories. Thank you so much for being a part of it. I cannot wait for folks to listen and hopefully tell us their stories with scissors and crafting and how they get messy.
Rafting and tubing.
What it's like to be on the river. Like, we need to know.
Let's do collage with paper clips in our hair on the river. Sounds like a with and pot plants at the same time.
Yeah. 100%.
It's going to be a whole immersive journey.
Wow. Sounds like a wild weekend. I'm excited.
I'm down.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Hey, Taylor.
Hey.
Wow. That conversation with Katie is still ringing through my ears. We covered so much and I was super rich. Yeah, I'm curious what's still super alive for you since the conversation that we had with her.
Well, I also love that right after the conversation, there was like an after party where we like hung out in Riverside together, and now her and Virginia, who I said should be connected based on our after party, are chit-chatting on LinkedIn. And that is like my favorite thing in the whole world, when you notice like a shared values in someone and like a shared mission, and then to like watch them chit chat is like the best thing. So that's one thing, feeling alive. But from the actual
I love that. No, I mean, that's I think so much of these conversations are to find our tribes, like to find these kindred spirits that we're all trying to walk through the world in similar ways, or at least guided by similar values and principles. So bringing those out is just a wonderful byproduct of these conversations.
Yeah, and I feel really, really lucky to have so many of those kinds of humans in my orbit at this point. Like, it's really, really special. And so to be able to connect them is like my dream come true. I always say when I bring circles of friends in my life together for like I host a gathering at my apartment or like a hangout in the park or whatever, I'm like, my dream is that you guys hang out without me. Like, do not invite me, hang out with each other.
But remind me when we were reading, or maybe it didn't come from Change, but you were like, there are different types of connectors or different, what was that book?
Oh, it was Social Chemistry. It's actually right here.
Yeah, and
there were 3 different kinds of connectors.
Exactly. That's all I remember. I just remember I resonate with the one where I don't have to be involved.
I found it. So
Great.
The 3 are called the expansionist, the broker, and the convener. And I'm the broker because I'm getting 2 connections to then hang out. But I think if I'm right, I feel like you were the convener because I think you like gathering people and like them being together. I don't remember. I don't think you were the expansionist.
I can't remember. The convener sounds like me. It's a gatherer. It's a gatherer of people where I like to create context for people to meet, but don't really have to be involved in the meeting.
Yes. Yeah. I was hoping I could find the actual, there's like a very powerful graphic with the little dots, but clearly my
maybe we can add it in the show notes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Anyways, I just love connecting to people like little dots like on this, on the cover here. So that was very lovely. And I think there's something really magical about connecting people that I know from different parts of my life. So that was cool to do that. Anyways, the other thing feeling alive from this episode is just how much having kids gives adults a chance to then like access that play and joy that maybe they've forgotten or haven't leaned into as much as an adult. I think like there's a really interesting question around what is something you love to do as a kid, or what brought you a lot of joy, or how did you spend your free time as a kid? And then comparing that to how we spend our free time as an adult. And I think there's a lot of magic in the differences there and how we can maybe dial up that kid in us. And it was just cool to hear Katie even mention, I think it was during the episode, if not the little after party, about how like having kids can help you access that feeling of like joy as a kid, or messiness, or that play that maybe we lose as adults because we're kind of trained out of it. So that's something that I've been thinking about, because as someone who is not a parent yet, I think that there's like a lot in this phase of knowing that, what do I want to dial up from when I was a kid? I even saw something on LinkedIn the other day where it was like, what's something you would be surprised to know I did as a kid? And then you had to like share your answer in the comments. And so I shared that I used to ice skate. And it was just like cool to think about how much time I spent ice skating.
I used to build cars. No one would ever have expected that.
Yeah.
These hands don't look like they get dirty very often anymore.
Yeah. How many hours have you spent building a car this year?
Yeah, none. But I used to spend 10 to 20 hours a week, like dirty, covered in oil and grease. It's interesting because, you know, the thing that's also been going around in my mind, and I think these like, sort of dovetail together, and is just around space for being a child, or like this messiness and the way that we get trained to sort of show up as adults in this world, and how societal expectations like put all of these containers around us, most prominently also in our work lives. Like, oh, we have to work in this way, or we have to work in that way, or this is the way that you show up to a meeting, or this is the way that people do business. That it's really nice to find the simplicity of joy or of messiness.
I think it's even funny that like there's that phrase like, oh, I was acting like a kid, or oh, why don't you go act like a kid? Like that phrase is kind of funny to begin with, because what does that even mean? And I think there's like, it's interesting to think and reflect on like, when do we feel safe to do that, and in what ways? I was like even thinking about, I went on a really long walk through Central Park a few weeks ago, and Central Park is so big. Like living now on the west side of New York, I'm like, I'm just like experiencing so many different nooks and crannies of it that I didn't experience when I was on the east side. And I also wasn't right by Central Park. So like now I go into like follow different paths. Like I ended up in a castle the other day. I'm like, where am I?
Wow.
But yeah, epic. And there was a cute gift shop. I like need to go back and get the sweatshirt. But anyways, all to say that I stumbled upon these swings, and I freaking love swings. Like if I go to a playground, a swing, put me on a swing and I'm a happy girl. And there was no one on them. And there was like a different section where like they had the baby swings like further away, and there were kids on there with their parents and whatnot. But I just like got on a swing and like went back and forth for like maybe 10 or 15 minutes by myself, and like didn't have any headphones in. I was looking at all the robins that were nearby, bopping around. Like there was something so nice about it. And I was like, I miss being on a swing more. And I felt really safe to get on that swing and like have my moment of feeling like a kid. But then there are other moments I can think of where I'm like, oh my God, that would be like, even the fact that there was no one on them. If there was like a 4-year-old on one, maybe I wouldn't have felt safe to do that. And it's just interesting to think about.
It's interesting to think about what safety means in this context, because I think that in some ways, joy is a very pure emotion. And often it doesn't feel safe to give us space to do that, because we get all this pressure of more complex emotions that maybe like sit over those, like anxiety, like stuff that drives us to act like adults, you know? And actually it's like, do I have safety to really let go and really presently feel an emotion that is gonna, that I'm gonna feel joy now. Joy being this beautiful, transitory emotional state that is about really being fully alive and fully in flow. And I feel like sometimes safety is like, am I doing all the things that I need to do to like be an adult, to like deal with the responsibilities of life, to like, yeah, it was funny when you were sharing about the swing. I'm like, oh well, for me the safety is so much of like, is this container acceptable, but like acceptable to me to allow myself to let go into that, to the simplicity of the joy. It makes me think about this story that I don't know the source of the story, but definitely some kind of ancient tale about the fisherman. Do you know the story about the fisherman? There's a story about a fisherman, young guy, has a family. Every day he goes, sits on the dock and fishes. And he fishes for what his family need. So as soon as he finishes fishing, he brings the fish inside, he cooks dinner, and he has dinner with his family. Suddenly, he starts to have a bit of excess fish from his fishing. So he starts to sell the fish at the market, and he has a bit of extra cash. And as his cash accumulates from his extra fish that he gets, he sort of expands this. He's like, oh wow, I can build a business around this. And suddenly he has a small fishing boat, so he can increase the impact of his fishing from the money. And then suddenly his small fishing boat becomes a large fishing boat. And then he doesn't have enough time to like run the fishing boat, so he hires a team. And then he has a fleet of fishing boats, so he's never on the fishing boat anymore. He's just like managing all of the fishermen that work for him. And he does this until whatever, he has a really large business and he sells his business. And he goes back to sit on the dock to fish every day for his family. And that there's this whole journey of becoming an adult that often takes us further and further away from the thing that actually brought us simple joy. That like all the man wanted, as he's getting further away from the simplicity of catching a fish and feeding his family and eating dinner and having time, he went on this whole journey just to get back there. And that is like a segue into a tease for Inside Out 2, which I watched between the conversation with Katie and this conversation, which I highly recommend all listeners watch, because if you remember Riley's journey through Inside Out, and she now is going to this like next phase of her teenage life where puberty emerges. and the wonderful characters of joy, sadness, anger, disgust, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, so there's a whole new world of emotions that appear in Riley's internal reality.
Oh, there are new ones introduced.
That is really what happens, and Joy goes on a journey. I'm not going to say a lot more, but it's
okay.
It really captures this theme of what are these really pure emotions that really allow us to feel alive, and what happens when these more complex layers come in as we become adults, and how much we're all just looking for joy, right?
I can't wait to watch. I heard that it was on Amazon Prime and you could like download it for free right now. So I just went ahead and downloaded it for free, and so I can watch it for 30 days.
Highly recommend. I just rented it on Apple TV. I have Amazon Prime, so I wish I knew that. But it was so worth it. It's such. I was crying, obviously, and
maybe I can report back in a future episode what I thought.
Yeah, we could do a whole breakdown of that film. It's so rich, especially for people that are trying to live fully and in connection with their internal reality. So
nice.
Oh, so Taylor, where can we find more out about Kt, connect with them, and all that kind of jazz?
Okay, well, if you want to hear about their work stuff, renewvc.com. And if you want to check out their semi-regular newsletter, which I love that they've prefaced, hey, it's not always regular, is disruptingthestatusbro.beehive.com. Again, this will all be in the show notes, but I think it's nice to hear it out loud, especially if you're walking around with us in your earbuds. And then website is Kt, literally Kt, McBratney.com. And if you want to check out their community pledge, it's renewvc.com/community #pledge. And what about us, Josh? Where can you find us?
So firstly, follow us on LinkedIn, both of us independently. We talk and explore these themes daily and hope that there's lively conversation around these with the Groove community on our content, around our content.
The comment section is popping. So if you're listening and you're like, I want to get in on that action, check out our posts.
Yeah. And secondly, I was thinking more about the episodes and crafting space for messiness, for joy, for some of these things. And one of the things I love is if you're looking for that in your life, grooves create a really wonderful space to feel supported, to turn time into something that's really meaningful for you. And using grooves to paint or to craft or to practice an instrument or to be in nature and garden, it's really hard, I find, in my own life to find time to do those things. And when I get in a groove and for the next 50 minutes, I'm going to do something that brings me joy or is really messy, it turns it into a sacred act that now I have more permission, as we were talking about, to really be fully present in that and not feel bad about what else am I doing. So if that speaks to you, then join Groove. There'll be an extended 30-day trial in the show notes. So hit it, click it, reach out to us. We love meeting new members, helping you get set up, getting the most from the community and the platform, and finding like-minded people within the broader Groove community. Thank you so much for listening.